Welcome to the One Piece Wonders edition of my vintage diaper shirt collection. These gems are all cut out on the fold and often without any seams, hence their One Piece Wonder name. These guys are so simple to put together, but please watch this video in its entirety so you can see how all of the pieces go together, all of the options, how you can zing and zag. Since they are so simple and basic, there are many different routes and embellishments that can be taken. So with cutting out these gems, you'll want to work from one selvage edge of the fabric, folding that over just enough to place your pattern piece. This will maximize the use of your fabric, and if that sounds confusing, check out the video link below on arranging fabric on the fold. With many of the sizes for diaper shirts, use 1 and 4. I think all of the sizes except for the doll one. Don't quote me. It's not like I designed this thing. You'll begin by cutting it out on the fold, and then you'll go around the neckline, and from there open up the shirt and now cut the center front apart, the center of the shirt. So the back of the shirt is being cut out on the fold, the neckline is just being cut out, same on the fold because that's the easy way to go, and then you're just cutting the front of the shirt apart. Also, the diaper covers, if you'd rather go the lace trim top route, then simply fold down the tissue so it's out of the way while cutting. There is no need to trace this pattern. Y'all probably already knew that, but I am just pointing it out in case it wasn't obvious to someone. I hate for someone to trace this pattern because of a simple line that you could have folded down, right? So with the unlined versions of any of these views, you can finish the edges with 3 main methods. There are probably plenty more, but we're gonna go over 3 main methods here because the world is filled with squirrels who can't make up their mind. So you've got lace, a fabric bias band, or a machine or hand embroidered edge. It's a great time to use up those little bits of lace left over from other projects. And like I said, I'm sure there's other methods, and if you want to do them, I would love to see them. Or you can put your ideas in the comments below. That'd be fun. Machine hand embroidery. So with finishing the machine hand embroidery route, with the machine embroidered method, I do this before cutting out your fabric. I would highly recommend that you do the same. If you go the hand embroidered method, you may want to cut it out before your fabric and you may want to do it after. That's personal preference, and I have a video that goes over that method that is linked down below. Don't mind my pattern, it was still in the testing stages here, and yes, that's a pencil. My kiddos love to hide my friction heat activated pins. It's a fun game we've been playing. So use stabilizer as needed. Note, this does not lend well to being lined. I guess you could turn the lining edge under and hand sew it in place, but aesthetically, that looks a little off. At least I think so. I think there's beauty in the simplicity of the beautifully embroidered edge that stands on its own. So as far as what stitch to pick, that's a good question, one for your sewing machine. And it's personal preference, but I picked up a little scallop one for this bib and I tested it out, making sure the stitch length and width were to my liking. So from there, it's a matter of going around the entire view that you're making. And a little tip, I would suggest starting at the back or side of your garment, somewhere that isn't highly visible. That way, if the edges don't match up just right, if you're in the middle of a pattern or something like that, it can work itself out and it's not highly visible. From there, carefully trim up the edges. I like to keep it about 1/16 of an inch away from those threads. Obviously, be careful not to cut through the threads of the embroidery, and voila! Lace. Now we are on to the lace option. You can attach this via entre-deux or put the lace straight to the fabric. If you're using entre-deux as a middleman, then I would put 2 rows of straight stitches about 1/8 of an inch apart, trim that up and zigzag over them. And if you're putting entre-deux around a corner, you'll need to clip the curve so it can bend and lay nicely into place. I find the best way to do this is to clip just before I sew. So as I'm at the sewing machine and I see that I've got a curve coming up, I clip that area and I continue sewing. Now the same is true with dealing with other treatments such as piping. Just give it a clip and it will turn the corners. Like I said, I like to clip as I go since I find it's easiest to figure out where the clip should go that way. I also like to keep my needle down while lifting my presser foot as needed and turning the corners little by little. If you're using Entre Deux as a middleman, then I would put 2 rows of straight stitches about 1/8 of an inch apart, trim that up and zigzag over them. From there you can add the lace. If the lace that is going to be added remains fairly flat, I mean, you do need to gather it a little bit around the corners to some degree, but overall if it's fairly flat, then I would attach it by machine. But if it's gathered lace, I would recommend doing this by hand, and I have videos that go over how to attach lace to Entre Deux and how to attach it to fabric that are linked down below. Fabric bias band. Another method of finishing that raw edge is by using a bias band of fabric. This particular one has a little picot edges. It's from farmhousefabrics.com and one side is slightly smaller than the other. So the idea is that you sew with the smaller side facing up, and that ensures that you catch the wider side below. You know, the one that you can't see while you're sewing. Neat, huh? So make sure to fold down the raw edge of the fabric bias band before you begin stitching, and then just sew across. With all of these projects, there are many opportunities to use piping. I would highly suggest pulling the ends of the cord out from the piping and trimming that away so that your seams don't get bulky. Also, if you get in a situation where you want to put piping around the entire perimeter, remove the cording from those end sections and then overlap the end pieces with the raw edges angled outward. Once you have added the lining, everything will get enclosed into a nice, neat little situation like so. I like to place this overlapping situation somewhere that isn't highly visible, say like under the arm or something, you know, in the back. You'll get my drift. If your garment calls for elastic, you may want to place that now. Again, it's good to watch this video once all the way through before beginning so you can see how the pieces of this puzzle can be moved around, but I digress. You'll start by tackling down one side marked by the pattern, then you can stretch the elastic and stitch it down with the straight stitch, or you can use a zigzag to enclose the elastic. I've done both methods. They both work well. Just pick one route and get to stitching. When you get to the other side of the elastic, use a straight stitch to tack down that end to secure it in place. On the other hand, if your garment calls for elastic and you've decided to add a lining to the mix, then you have 2 routes you can take. You can either add elastic to both pieces of fabric, like separately, just in the method we just went over, and then join the elastics together, or you can join the lining together and then the elastic. This can be a little bit of a challenging route though. You will sandwich the elastic in between the 2 layers of fabric, tack it down, and then pull it along the path marked by the pattern, and of course, secure the other end of the elastic by tacking it down. Is it challenging but doable? Yes. If you are doing a line version of any garment, you can sew the 2 pieces of the fabric right sides together, leaving a gap. And I think keeping the gap somewhere where it's not highly visible is a great thing to keep in mind, right? Like, put your gap where you're not going to see it. With the garments like this diaper cover, you can take advantage of the top area and let that be your gap. one stitch all the way around, then flip the garment right sides out and you'll secure the gap somehow. You can press the gap inward and then top stitch around the garment. That also gives a little bit of style, right? That little top stitch action. But if you rather not see the stitches, then you can hand sew the gap closed using the ladder or whip stitch. This is the whip stitch, and while it's easy and fast to do, in my opinion, it's not my favorite in situations like this since it's more visible. So instead, I prefer to do the ladder stitch. You kind of go between the folds of the fabric and then move straight down, again between the folds of the fabric, move straight up, and then when you pull your threads taut, you'll see it basically disappears. It's kind of nice, right? Whenever you're adding a decorative trim to these views, try to place the raw edge of that trim in the seam, in a seam, or include a lining. So kind of think ahead, right? A little bit of a chess game. So it can be enclosed in the lining. So for like example, this diaper cover, I attach rickrack to the edge of the leg hole, and then I introduce this lining so I can trail the rickrack off, sew over top of it, and then it gets neatly tucked away in that assembly. So that's the overall concepts for all of the garments. Now let's look at each item individually so we can go over the step-by-step construction as well as some finishing bits and some one-off items. Let's start with those diaper covers. If you go the unlined version, you'll need to finish the edges somehow. You can do the entredot lace, just lace, fabric bias band, embroidered edges. You get the drift, all the things we just discussed, just finish those raw edges somehow. Then you'll need to put the elastic pieces into place. There's one piece of 1/8 inch wide elastic on each leg holes, as well as one piece of elastic on the back side. That piece can be 1/8 inch or 1/4 inch as your preference allows. Actually, I would do 1/4 inch wide for the bigger sizes personally. If you don't include the top edges of the waist area in the enclosure method of the leg holes, then fold those sections down twice. Iron them in place and then top stitch across. Or you can fold the top edge of the pattern down about 1/4 inch if you're doing the laced or lined version. If you're doing a lined version of the diaper covers, you can still decorate with some trim as we talked about with the rickrack earlier. Then you can sew around the entire perimeter of the diaper cover, leaving a gap somewhere so you can turn everything right sides out. As I mentioned, I left my gap in the top like waist area. Okay, back of the waist. That makes sense? Back side of the diaper cover at the waist. The straight edge. After I'd clipped up the curves, trimmed the corners, giving everything a really good pressing, now we can think about putting in the elastic. Well, actually, let me back up. I know, watch this video all the way through once. Each line version has 2 routes you can take with the elastic. You can either place the elastic at each piece of the diaper cover individually and then join the diaper covers to its lining after the fact, sewing around the perimeter, leaving a gap, and flipping everything right sides out. Or you can sandwich the elastic in between the diaper cover and its lining after the two have been joined together. This is the method I was talking about earlier. It's more difficult to do this method. You'll have to kind of twist your hand around while keeping the layers of fabric in place and then sewing. You'll still need to sew. Yes, it's doable, but challenging. Then you'll close up that gap, which I place on the top of the back of the waist. I fold down each raw edge under 1/4 inch, pinning and ironing that into place, and then I sew the layers together. I pull on the diaper cover so I can sew that flat across, like pulling that elastic so the fabric lays flat, and then I top stitch on those edges. From there, you'll just need to add closures, buttons, snaps, a button snap combo, or these wonderful snaps that are snaps. I particularly like this option when the bloomers are lined, so you have 2 layers of fabric to sink those teeth into. When it's a delicate fabric, I would recommend going with regular snaps or buttons. Voila! Diaper covers. Diaper shirts views 1 and 4 both have box pleats in the back. To do these, fold one side of the pleat like so, and then pin it in place, and of course, do that to the other side, pinning that in place as well. You can baste it in place and then move on to the next step, whether that's putting lace on or joining it to the lining. Maybe you're putting piping around the edges. Lots of different options here. Let's look at diaper shirt view 1. First, we need to finish that sleeve area. This is the length between the dots marked on your pattern piece. You can do this with a piece of lace, trim, or piping like I'm doing for this make. Friendly reminder to clip away the cording within the piping so you don't get bulky seams. And angle off your treatment so the raw edges can be enclosed in the side seam. I'm also putting that piping around the center front neckline down the other side of the front. Of course, this would be darling in lace or rickrack or whatever. There are so many different options with these seams, but you get the idea. You could continue the treatment of your choice around the hem too. Just shorten the fabric before you do that to the line marked on the pattern. And going that method, that would make the raw edges for the entire diaper shirt enclosed. So you would just need to join the side seams and you'd be on to the finishing details, right? But you can make this lined. To do this, put the lining right side together with the garment fabric. Stitch across from one hem up that center front, around the neckline, back down the other center front, and across the other front hem. Clip those curves as necessary, and now fold up the back hem 1/4 inch and iron that down in place. Doing this for both the garment and lining fabrics. This is just folding those raw edges of the hem at the back of the shirt up in preparation for joining it with the lining. Pinning them together may be helpful, you're just getting things out of the way. Then you'll place the side seams of the garments together, right sides together, treating each side seam separately. So you'll sew down the side seam of the garment with right sides together, and then the side seam of the lining again right sides together. At this point, everything is enclosed nicely, and now you just need to finish the hem at the back of the shirt. I did this by hand, but to each their own, as well as the lining sleeve to the edge of the shirt. I also did this by hand. I just whip stitched her in there. So diaper shirt view 4. A similar approach can be taken with diaper shirt view 4, but this view has some darling little tucks. There are a few ways to achieve these tucks, and it depends on how precise you want to get. Sure, you could pull a thread and even hand sew the tucks together. Honestly, this is quite a sweet little route to go. I find the process to be really relaxing, and the results are precious. Definitely has that little vintage vibe to it, that hand sewn with love feel. But instead, you can mark the tucks with an erasable pen and then fold the lines onto themselves. From there, you can either hand sew or machine sew them in place. Another method would be to bust out a flashcard or any cardstock. Actually, this is something I learned from Cindy Foose. You can just mark one line. I would pick that center line in this case, and then place the center line on the flashcard, like the side of the flashcard, and you'll iron it down, which will erase the heat activated pin, but that's okay since we've got our folded edge in place. We just need to know the width of the tuck to be sewn from the folded edge. And just check your pattern piece to see how wide your tuck should be. The width of the tucks vary depending on the size that you are making. After the tucks are placed, the steps are fairly similar to view 1 that we just went over. I decided to make this version unlined, so I did the sleeve treatment via some French lace and then joined the side seam using a tiny French seam. This needs to be tiny to go around the curve of the underarm area. Diaper shirts views 2 and 5 and bonnets 1 are very similar. If you're making them unlined, then finish those raw edges somehow. You know the drill by now. Lace, maybe a hand-rolled hem. I've got a video that goes over that, link down below. Embroidered edge, you get the drift. Piping, whatever. After doing the treatment of your choice around the entire perimeter, now you'll just need to place the straps for the diaper shirts and sew in the elastic for the bonnet. Meanwhile, if you're doing the lined version, you can sandwich a trim in between those layers if you wish, and then join the garment together with its lining, sewing around the perimeter, leaving a gap so you can turn the whole shebang right sides out. And now we're back to needing to place those straps again. For view 2, this is simply crisscrossing the straps and securing it with a button or snap. Meanwhile, view 5 has a couple different options to take. You can have this shirt open in the front of the child or the back of the child, and the straps can be placed on top or on bottom. I like them in a boat with a goat. And secure the straps in place on this view for Daisy with one button in the back. I think one bigger button in the back is so simple and precious, but then a line of 3 buttons would be adorable too. I've got vintage instructions that show only whip stitching on the top strap to the dress, but I went around the entire strap hiding my stitches in the ditch of the piping. And then you can add a decorative bow. I'm still working on my bow tying abilities, so overlook that. But buttons, beads, charms, a ribbon flower, those all would be darling options too. Or a little sweet embroidered motif. That would be so precious. So, diaper shirt view 3. This has 2 ways to do the shoulder seams. You can either join the shoulders via buttons or snaps or whatever, or you can fold the tissue down and cut along the top dotted line as marked by the pattern, allowing the shoulders to be joined with a seam. The seam route is definitely easier and quicker, but the buttons are so darling, right? Anywho, another decision to make is with this front facing. Now, you could fold the entire front facing back and cut the garment without a facing, and instead, in that situation, you would use lace or something to enclose those raw edges and button down the shirt that way. But squirrels aside, if we're sticking with that facing, then you'll fold the raw edge under about 1/4 inch and iron that down in place, and then the entire thing over on that main line marked by the pattern. Then you'll stitch the facing in place. Some folks like to just tack this in place, and that would be the less obvious choice, like visually obvious, while the next step would be hand sewing, and then the most visible would be machine sewing down the facing in place. But here you can see the machine sewing with a finer thread looks just fine, at least I think so. I finished the other raw edges of the garment with lace, and voila, we've got ourselves an unlined version. Meanwhile, you can make this into a lined version by sewing around the perimeter, making sure to avoid those shoulder seams. From there, you could just match the shoulders of the garment, sew them right sides together, and then you repeat the same thing for the lining side. So you do the garment side of the shoulder seams, sew those together, and then turn it the other direction and you sew the lining of the shoulder seams. And then pull the arm's eye shoulder thing all the way out to finish the curve. So you're going to reach into your gap and you're going to pull out each arm's eye individually and sew that little gap together. So while doable, that does get a little tricky. So here's an alternate route. You'll turn the shoulder edges under and you can simply top stitch over these, or you can hand sew them into place. Obviously hand sewing them would be less obvious. Yes, I like method 1 better, but it does get a little bit tricky, so there's 2 methods, take your pick. For bonnet view 2, the raw edges have the option of being folded under twice instead of using lace or whatnot to be finished. To do this, fold the raw edges under 1/8 of an inch twice. To finish up the bonnet, add ribbons on the bow placement as marked on the pattern pieces. You can place a button on top of the ribbon. That's a lovely way to polish off the whole thing. And for the view 1 bonnet, you can have a workable buttonhole thing, or you can simply tack the back edges in place. You could use a snap button combo, a snap on its own. You get the idea. Sewing you do you. Just bring those 3 pieces together somehow. And similarly with the bibs, just add ribbons in those placements and buttons if you wish, or snaps, or it is sewing you do you. I know these little gems come together really quickly. I keep calling them sugar cookies for so many reasons. Quick, easy, pretty, and so addicting. Love me a good 10-minute project, great for that special baby in your life, and perfect for your next baby shower gift. If you have any questions, please put them down in the comments below and I will do my best to answer them. And as always, I appreciate y'all for watching and I hope to catch y'all next time.